Good evening, Dumela, Sawabona, Sakpase, Namaste, Upshin, Dubla Ota, Assalamu alaikum, Hotep, Buenas noches, bonsoir. What's going on? Welcome to the episode 9 of the Lott, Carey, Wise Digital Couch. It is amazing to be able to sit here with you and have engage and empower some people and communities and conversation and critical conversations about issues that are sometimes not accessible, but need to be accessible to all listeners. My name is Joriel Inez Larrier of the Lott, Carey Women in Service Everywhere, and I welcome you to the Digital Couch. We are here on a number of different platforms, and so I would encourage you, if you are watching on our Lott Carey TV, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear this information. If you are watching on our Facebook personal and private group, let somebody else know this is for them. Tonight's episode is a tender topic, and I'm going to give the disclaimer at this point. This is a trigger warning. The conversation for tonight is a very delicate one, and we are very sensitive to the fact that some people who may be watching could be triggered by the discussion. Please know that this is not our intention. The intention is to increase awareness about gender-based violence. We're going to be speaking tonight with two ministers who are part of the Lott Carey family. And so, on behalf of our leadership, which includes the Executive Secretary, Treasurer, Reverend Emmett Dunn, the President, Reverend Dr. Gina Stewart, our first Vice President, Dr. Jesse Williams, our second Vice President, Dr. James Victor, and the leadership of the Women in Service Everywhere, the Reverend Dr. Angelita Clifton, who is the President, the Reverend Dr. Brenda McBurrow, who's our first Vice President, and Sister Lynette Richardson, who is the second Vice President. We welcome you. Tonight, we have on our digital couch, and you know what I say, when we're on the couch, you need two things. You need your mug, because it's going to get rather interesting. And you need probably something to write on or write with, because you might want to take some notes. Tonight, we have with us the Reverend Dr. Carol L. Patterson and Pastor C.A. Pace. I will bring them to the couch, and then we'll hear a little bit more about them. Good evening, Dr. Patterson.
Good evening.
And good evening, Pastor Pace.
Good evening.
Good evening. Let me give the mini bio, and then let's get to it. The Reverend Dr. Carol Lynn Patterson is the Associate Regional Pastor of the American Baptist Church of New Jersey, and as well as the Associate Minister of the First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens in Somerset, New Jersey. Shout out to you today. We also have Pastor Carl A. Pace, who is the pastor of True Light Baptist Church of Grand Rapids, Michigan. So we have somebody from I call it the Midwest.
It is Midwest. It is.
Because I'm from Brooklyn. Everything past Pennsylvania is the Midwest. And he's also his church was the host church of the last time that we saw each other in 2019. So we bless both of you for being a part of our conversation tonight. Thank you very, very much. We're going to hop right into the conversation. And I am already aware that there are some people in my personal community who are really interested in this topic. So we are at the beginning of November, and we have just come out of a global awareness. And so there's awareness going on a number of levels here, where October was Domestic Violence Awareness Month. That pertains to our conversation tonight. You see us all donned in a hue of black, because today is Thursday, and Thursday we participate in Thursdays in Black, which is a global ecumenical awareness initiative where we are standing in the gap. We are advocating. We are the allies, and we are the activists for those who have suffered at the hands of a violent act based upon gender. We also, the Women in Service Everywhere has also just completed a book study called If It Wasn't for the Women by Gilks. And that book was a very, very timely text where we discussed the role of women within the sanctified church. And this is part and parcel to our conversation because the role of women within the institution of the religious sector sometimes can be elevated on one hand and then diminished on another. How does this come into play of this conversation? That's what we're going to get into. So, Dr. Patterson, Pastor Pace, if you want to greet the group before we hop in.
Ladies first.
Good evening, Lott Carey family, friends, family. Honored and delighted to be here to discuss this topic. I'm glad that we are breaking the silence on it. I'm saddened that in 2021 we haven't made more progress, but I praise God because I know that added to the work of Women in Service Everywhere, the United Nations, local churches, different organizations that partner and collaborate with Lott Carey, we will and we are turning the tide.
I just want to thank the leadership for this opportunity to be with you today. I brought my mug. That's all I got.
And we are going to bring light to this conversation, even though it is a touchy topic. I'm glad that we're starting with a smile. That's right. So actually, my mug tonight says, oh, y'all can't see it. It says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Okay.
Oh, you got a Jesus mug. Oh, I didn't know that's what you're supposed to have.
Wait, no, but look.
See? Sanctified.
I have a Free Your Mind mug. This is the name of my radio show.
Okay. Shameless plugs. I love those too.
You got to do it.
Bless you all. So just shout out. We're going to have to get a Lott Carey mug in here at some point. I don't know if Lott Carey has mugs. We're going to have to get one. But thank you. Thank you both for being willing participants to engage in this conversation. So we're going to start right off. This particular session rose to the surface as a result of a horrible occurrence that has been on the news, has been in the limelight, and is a dastardly situation. So I'm going to just put on the surface that there's an allegation, and I'm going to leave it as an allegation because once something comes out in the news, then different people want to say, well, is this what really happened? Or here's another perspective. Or the bottom line is this. In Philadelphia, on the train, on SEPTA, I believe it's called, there is a story of a woman who was on the train and there was a gentleman there as well. I do not know the relationship between the two people. If it's within the newspapers, what is written is what exists. The story goes that the woman is being sexually attacked by the man. There are other people who are on the train, maybe 8, 9, or 10. During the attack, the other people, there's no movement. There's no interaction. There's no coming to the person's rescue. One story that comes out later is that, well, someone did make a phone call, or maybe it was a person who was a member of the transit system, but someone made a call. And then the local authorities came to find out what was happening. That's one. I'm in Brooklyn. What I was made aware of first is a woman who was coming up the stairs, who was on the stairs, and anyone from New York at Atlantic Avenue train station, which is almost like Grand Central Station. And this part is actually recorded, so there's no way you can get around this one. Like on the train, it wasn't recorded, so it's by hearsay. You see a woman that's coming up the stairs, and there's a man who's sort of coming up the stairs behind her, and you see a little bit of just a shove. Not a shove, but like a nudge. The man travels further up the stairs, turns around, lifts his foot, and just kicks the woman in the chest. and you see the woman tumbling down the stairs. There is a person that she tumbles past. That person just turns and does like that. We have two situations where women, and this is the conversation for tonight, is it that it is their gender that renders their bodies as just objects that can be moved on and moved upon, and other people won't, shouldn't, or almost like dared to get involved. So the first question, and so this part of this conversation is going to have to deal with what is our tolerance level? What do we as observers of violence and violent acts upon women in particular, because that's the focus of the conversation. What is our role just as humans? What is our role as neighbors and as community members? What is our role in this particular conversation as Christians? Are we our brother and sister's keeper? And if we are, how do we do that and keep ourselves safe? How do we do that and get home? Where do we draw the line? And what is the church's responsibility, or at least impact and influence in bringing this conversation to the surface? So that's the framework. So I'm going to offer the first question. So in today's society, what do you think are societal or social practices or widely held beliefs within communities that potentially increase the vulnerability of women to becoming victims of violence? What are your thoughts?
You still doing ladies first, Pastor Pace?
Sure.
I think misogyny is one of the things, and I don't mean to talk at people, but to have a conversation, we have to have the same definitions. Misogyny being a dislike of, a contempt for, or an ingrained prejudgment against women. I think that this country overall, being allegedly a world leader, but the one that has not yet had a female leader, and even Lott Carey being touted for having being the first national Baptist organization for having a female leader, and how unique and exotic and strange it is. While Dr. Stewart is definitely a competent leader and it shouldn't be looked at that way, it is. So I think that in many cases, women are looked at as less than. And then a play on misogyny is the word misogynoir, which writer Moya Bailey came up with to describe a unique hatred, discrimination against Black women, the anti-Blackness that we face for being Black women, the anti-feminism that we face for being women. And she even talked about it cutting across socioeconomic lines, and talked about misogynoir being what made Meghan Markle, with all her money and status and royalty, need to consider suicide. And she's only half Black. So imagine what it's like for those of us who are 100% Black. So I think those are some societal views. And two more things I just want to throw in there quickly and yield to Pastor Pace is intersectionality, starting out as a legal term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, the same thing, that we live at the intersection of being Black and being women, and often being discriminated against. Adultification is my last word for this topic, and that is Black girls are looked at as grown women and sexualized objects, which is why R. Kelly's situation took so long to be dealt with. If he would have bothered one white girl, he would have been in jail a long time ago. Pastor Pace?
Oh, man, you used all the big words for us. So I'll just use the regular words. So honestly, one of the issues that we run into, especially when we talk about gender-based violence, we know that women and young girls are the highest affected. So we recognize that already. But really, as it relates to societal norms and those kinds of things, there is a spirit of toxic masculinity that looms, whether you're Black, white, Asian, whatever. There is this idea that as a man, that you are on the positive side supposed to be a provider, or a protector. But on the negative side, I think it creates this idea that it makes the people who you provide and protect for less than. So you don't give them the proper respect or love or care that you should. And for those people who take those ideas and they put the toxic twist on it, it creates that place of violence. It creates that place of harm for our women and young girls. And part of this conversation has to speak to the fact that there is a toxicity among fathers and their sons that have traveled from generation to generation that we have not been properly taught or engaged as it relates to properly respecting women. We know we're supposed to pay bills. We know we're supposed to make sure they have a roof over their head. We know that, they are there to lean and depend on us. But we have to try to make a broader definition of that.
When you talk about masculine toxicity, it reminds me that women who are wives or daughters are looked at as dependents versus people who are a blessing. But think about what that does for the single woman who's out in the world having to take care of herself. Now she's out of place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She's uncovered.
Not only uncovered, but in places and spaces where she doesn't belong, expecting a fair wage because she's a head of household when you're just a woman and there should be some man caring for you. Why should we pay you a fair salary?
And if you're too independent, that is a turnoff. That is a negative. That is that is rough. That's just rough water. So it's hard for you to engage and find somebody to be with because you just too independent for me. So yeah, I completely understand.
So I want to I thank you so much for the people who are already blowing up the chat. This is great. So I'm going to just read. Thank you to one of our facilitators. So the clarification is that the woman on the train in Pennsylvania was raped in front of a crowd. And it was filmed for social media. So that's like the other thing. It's one thing to have an assault occur. It's another thing to witness it. It's a whole other level to stand by, to watch, and then to promote it so that the rest of the world could see it. Like this is old-fashioned, and I'm sorry to say old-fashioned, but world star hip-hop, but not to engage in order to support and to take care of her or come to her aid. So another comment that was made, thank you, is toxic masculinity is a global issue. An example is an Olympic medal winner from Kenya was recently stabbed to death by her boyfriend. Interesting. Sad, not interesting, but sad. And so before we continue on this, and so for those who are watching and even for the panel who's here, this is not, it will not be male bashing. It will not. We are having this conversation so it can be a healthy conversation, because as we are looking at what is happening now, and thank you, Pastor Pace, for stepping back a bit in order to address the topic or to recognize that as the males that exist today, with all of the stuff that we've had historically as a culture and as a race of people, we've had to learn things on the quick, as I'll say for right now, and we just had to learn in the minute. But those people who sort of get to sit behind the glass windows and say, oh, let me sort of look at this anthropologically. Let me look at this, from a cultural perspective. Y'all have time to do that. But we have to get these kids raised to 18, and we have to get them out to, and there may not be enough time to sort of say, hey, this is really, if you're going from teenagehood and you're looking at your mom or your grandma and how you respect them, to then going into a partnership with a female and trying to grow whatever you saw in your household in terms of male-female relationships. A lot of young men are just left to go figure it out. And that's where some of the toxic masculinity, because if they're not seeing it, of course, in their home, then they're looking at the icons that they see in media. And we already know that that's jacked up. So thank you so much for that. So someone else said, too independent. What's that? LOL. Okay, right. So that's a whole female conversation that, of course, we can
That's episode 10.
That's episode 10. We're talking right. And so thank you. So here's the last comment that I'll read for now, and that's we're talking about institutions. Yeah, so we're going to get into the systemic part of it, right? So we are addressing institutions and policies and practices that reinforce gendered racism. And yes, to echo again, this is not about bashing men. This is an open conversation with religious leaders who are in our community. We got to start here. So let's transfer this to what you started talking about, Pastor Pace, about, let's say, the historical reference.
So before we transfer, can we just refer back to the article in the story for a second?
Sure.
Because voyeurism, I think this has been a thing for a long time. Now that we have phones and we can record things, people get confused in thinking that when they're recording, they actually are doing something. So the article mentioned that it was 20 some stops before the call was made. Now, as you stated, we don't know, we weren't there, but the article says the police, when they did respond, were very concerned that no one thought to call earlier, because when they were finally called, they responded within 3 minutes. So all of those people who were watching and recording for all that time only prolonged the attack. I can understand why they might not want to jump in and be fearful, but it wouldn't cost you anything to call or text the authorities.
Interesting. Thank you for bringing that point to light. Pastor Pace, do you want to add on, or?
No, I'm gonna just let you move on. I think okay. I can kind of hit it on the next spot.
No problem. I appreciate you. Thank you. So let's talk about what we are taught on the come up. I'll use that vernacular, on the come up. So what kind of messages are young men and young women receiving about navigating complicated web of extended family and its expectations? In my mind, what right now is popping into my head, because I'm a movie buff, is Tyler Perry. Hold on, I'll explain in a second. Are they watching role models cope with relationship stressors in silence, or with using substance abuse, or in verbal and physical violent acts? Now, let me break that down. So this is why I mentioned Tyler Perry. So one thing about the movies or the plays or the shows is that there's always, of course, like some sort of like a family drama. And of course, there are all of these players that have that. For some of us in our community, we can say, I got an uncle like that, or I got a cousin like that, or my grandmama acts like that. But they are examples of how we address unhealthy relationships, how we normalize things that sort of don't go right and we don't talk about them. And then some of like the real kind of dirty stuff that happens, and how we as a community, we kind of embrace it. Most of the time we don't let people from the outside in, because it's like, don't put our stuff out in the street. I know I was told that what happens in this house, come on with me, what happens?
Stays in this house.
Stays in this house. And that adds a level of, but if there's drama and I need some help, I can't get it because I'm not supposed to talk about it. So there's almost like this code of ethics within our community of, what happens here stays here. But then we continue the cycle, not because we intend to, but because we're not allowed to share and we're not allowed to accept support from outside experts in the field. And those experts are growing. And so we're going to sort of, again, funnel down to the response and the involvement and the impact and influence that the church universal can have. So what kind of messages are young women and men getting? And let's sort of get into the church now. What kind of messages are we sending, or have we sent to our young people about what is now being normalized? All right, Pastor Pace, it's your turn.
Oh, is it my turn? Okay. I'll go. So, okay, let's start with this concept is that we have always been taught about the idea of the village, how important it is to have this community of people around you who essentially want the best for you, and that they are willing to do anything in order to make sure that that happens. As we see the rise in incarceration of Black men, fathers in the home, we see that village kind of becoming a shaken place. So because there's no protect, go back to my original term, because there's no one there to protect the family. A lot of times, young people are victimized in family situations because there's no one there to initially protect them, and then kind of moving forward, there's no one there to believe them when they speak about whatever abuse or whatever they've gone through.
Yeah.
So you couple that with our current generation and social media and reality TV shows, and how, everybody, if you want to make money, you need to act up. That's there's no money in not acting up. So one of the things I read a few weeks ago was the Real Housewives of Atlanta. I'm not up on the show. I know y'all are. Most of you are watching me today. Don't shake your head. Y'all watch it.
No,
I don't have television. I actually don't have television.
Like reality.
Okay, really. So the producer, whose name is Andy Cohen, speaks about what they look for in a housewife. And one of the things that they shared was, if you don't create enough drama, you are then written off the show.
Ratchet.
So those are the things that our young people see. We see a decline in our villages, those kinds of things. So all of that stuff plays a role in family value, family systems. Not only that, and we'll be transparent because we're here. There's a lot of issues within families that we don't talk about. So please don't tell my mother y'all saw this. My grandfather had two families, like two real life families, like they lived 2 blocks apart. So when he died, we didn't know nothing about this other family till it was time for the funeral. So those are the kinds of things that we've held in, those secrets that we've kept within our families, and people knew about it and those kinds of things, but they were not necessarily addressed. And I believe that those are some of the issues that we run into. And that's the problem with our young people. They see things not being addressed. And, talking about therapy and those kinds of things, those are all new nuances to the Black community. That's all new stuff. That is brand new to talk about. Hey, I'm going to see somebody to tell them about what my issues are. Because in our community, if you have issues, you're crazy.
And you just better pray about it.
Yeah.
You better fast.
Mm-hmm.
You better, stay on the mourner's bench.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, give more money to the church.
Right.
Do more missionary work. I need to sit on a couch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I need to see a licensed therapist.
Right.
Thank you for bringing that. Right.
And the pastor usually isn't a licensed therapist. I don't know what to tell you. All I can say is that's messed up. You need to go somebody got a degree for that.
That was actually that was question number 4. We're gonna bring it to this one right here.
Okay.
Precisely. So actually let's take it there. Actually, Dr. Patterson, what's your response?
When we were talking about families, Pastor Pace touched on it. We keep secrets that put the next generation in danger.
Somebody type in family secrets. Just somebody type that in.
And we have to be brave enough to break this cycle about our suffering and our dysfunction. Intimate partner violence, IPV, which February is Ipv Awareness Month, is allowed or tolerated in dating or normalized because people have either seen it with their own eyes in their own homes or sensed that it was going on, and no one has said anything about it. Mm-hmm. And in church, it's usually whispered about because of what you said earlier about don't talk about what's going on in this house. We talked about blaming and shaming, and I want to share a little bit of my own testimony like Pastor Pace did. I don't call myself a domestic violence survivor. I think I'm a domestic violence conqueror, the same way people talk about conquering cancer. And when I was married to a pastor who was abusive, I had two incidences with people who I thought were like family, friends that were so close they were family. One was my husband and I, ex-husband, were having a physical altercation, and I called this pastor who I thought was both of our friends. I was yelling because and he thought I was joking at first, and he was laughing. He was, you crazy, ha 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 ha. And when he discovered that I was serious about what was going on, he said, I told him he needs to stop this because churches don't want a pastor that's going to beat his wife.
Wow.
Now, this is supposed to be my friend, somebody he doesn't care what's happening to me. He wants to protect the abusive pastor's position. That was one. Another was I had broken my foot, and a sister from the church came by to bring some groceries, allegedly to help out. And I was sleeping on the first floor because with a broken foot, who wants to go up and down the steps? It was no secret that my ex-husband was dealing with more than one woman in the church. And this woman said to me, First Lady, maybe if you would share the bed with Pastor, he would be more faithful. So you're blaming me. Let's not talk about the chicken and the egg. Maybe I'm not sharing the bed with him because he's not faithful. But these are the kinds of things. And these are people who are supposed to love you. So imagine what a stranger is going to do. And part of the reason we don't talk about these things is because we don't want to be pitied or shamed or blamed for the problem. So that's a whole lot. But then there's one more new alarming wrinkle in the LGBTQ community. Statistics are that trans Black women suffer violence and death at much higher rates than other people. And I'm not here to push that agenda or that issue, but God says whosoever will. And so I think we need to care about anybody who's a victim of gender-based violence.
Mm-hmm. But once again, so you go back to the things that we're taught. Mm-hmm. Being gay, being transgender, it's strange and weird, mm-hmm. and you need to talk to God about getting it fixed. Yes. And if you have any of these feelings or emotions, something's wrong with you. So instead of going to see somebody and talking about it, you lash out and you are physically violent towards those people because you don't know how to deal with the emotions you have within yourself. So absolutely, all those things tie together.
And then pastors teach in Bible study, you're like this because of the fall. We all have stuff wrong with us because of the fall. How dare you say that to a person,
who's dealing with stuff?
Yes. So going back to the therapy issue, I thank God when I was in seminary, they paid for us to go to therapy because they said we shouldn't be putting our issues on the people. Mm-hmm. And that was so life-giving to me while going through a divorce, to be able to sit on somebody's couch and talk about what I was going through. But that was a predominantly white seminary. As you mentioned, both of you, the Black church is just moving toward I can have Jesus and a therapist. But then you mentioned something.
Wait a minute. Can somebody type that in the chat? I can have Jesus and a therapist. Somebody needs to type that in the chat. Go ahead, Dr. Patterson. I need to sip on that.
The last thing I want to say on that, though, is what's so difficult is some people, we're underinsured. How do I pay for this therapist? Because I've been telling a friend of mine recently who's going through a lot, you need to get a therapist. And he said to me, it's stressful to think about how I'm going to pay for the therapist.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. There was a lot right there. Let me, for the record, thank you kindly for being transparent, for, as we say in our community, opening the closet, drawing back the curtains, and just sharing a piece of your own life that, again, let's say prior to, who knows, maybe 2 months ago, a number of us, and you're in leadership, would never have unearthed that unless it was in your own tight community. So I really appreciate that. Because you are leaders and you are drawing back the curtain, again, it makes it more accessible to recognize that you're real people. It makes it more allowable that if my leader can share and be vulnerable and still stand up and say, I got Jesus and a therapist, and I have enough, right? Because, I'm trying to do a play on the words of I have Jesus and that's enough. As I said in our pre-chat, we're taught that Jesus is enough, but Jesus also, in concert with the Lord, with a DT, empowered some people who just want to focus on the mental and the emotional state of people, and that is their ministry.
Yes.
Go to them. In addition to going to church, it's okay. And I remember in my own, let's say, religious upbringing, not until about, I want to say less than maybe 7 years ago, did I hear from my pulpit that therapy is okay. We're talking about less than 10 years. And I said, oh, but I had, with things that I was growing up with, there were moments that I sat in some groups, some social groups that were counseling in design, but it wasn't anything that we were allowed to talk about. And in the family gatherings, it wasn't anything that we were allowed to talk about comfortably. So whenever I got into those circles, it was just like, what's wrong with you? No, how about there's something that has to be talked about and addressed? And it may not be, there's no time in church to talk about it because we go in for worship, we leave, unless you're in a small circle. So now let's address how the church currently might be or could possibly be supporting issues like this or turning a blind eye. So here's the question. So as pastors, how do you see the church universal helping to stem the tide of gender-based violence? And we're here on a Thursday, and so we're, dressed in black for Thursdays in black. Thank you all for donning the black. But how is the concept supported in your teaching, in your leading, in maybe even ideology, 5-year, 10-year plan, or something that you currently have going on? And if it's a new concept that we're still sort of wrestling with, even if you say that and you're saying we're working on it, proud to hear that.
So, Dr. Patterson, you go first.
I think one part of the solution is discussions like this. One of the things I very much appreciate about Women in Service Everywhere is March and the 31 days of prayer, the different topics that we lift up, that we're praying for women all around the world, that we pick different things that deal with the liberation of women. I think another outside of the church that I think we need to do a better job of bridging the gap between. There are so many good Baptists who say, I don't want to hear about politics in the church. Politics is in everything in life. And there are certain things happening in government and organizations outside of the church that we need to latch onto and embrace. One, I mentioned Kimberly Crenshaw's name earlier, and she started that hashtag Say Her Name campaign, her African American Policy Forum. And we need that campaign, hashtag Say Her Name, because we were talking about all the brothers who were being killed by police, and that is tragic and it is terrible. But there are a lot of women and girls, Black, being killed by the police, and too often it was overlooked, unnoticed, untold until Say Her Name. And I really think Say Her Name is what made us talk about Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. Because when news of Breonna Taylor first started surfacing, people were saying, well, her boyfriend fired a shot. No matter what happened, the police killed her. And so I think we always try to find all the little nuances and what might be wrong, why the victim may have caused the violence against themselves. And we have to move away from that. So that's my first piece. And then when you talked about what we're working on, I like to call myself the curator and not the founder of Setting the Captives Free Ministries, because I believe Jesus is the founder of it. But I'm definitely committed to preaching and teaching a liberated gospel. And I have to admit publicly tonight that I don't preach and teach enough about Thursdays in Black. But what I want to do to change that is I want to partner with WISE on an out-of-the-box initiative for 2022 that I would love to talk to the leadership about to see if they're in agreement with me. But just part of what the concept would be is a study guide in October for us to look at domestic violence through the lens of scripture, but also through the lens of some real life testimonies of some people with flesh and blood telling their stories. The same way we do storytelling for racial healing, we need to do storytelling for healing against gender-based violence.
Okay, you heard it first. You heard it first. So let me, and Dr. Clifton is she's blowing up the chat right now. I know she's blowing up the chat. So let me say on her behalf, because I know she would want me to do this, that for the past 2 years, so this is this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Clifton, we have had an initiative of, like last year, the conversation was TIM, which stands for Trauma Informed Ministry.
Yes.
And it was beautiful to allow the conversation about how we as churches, how we as religious centers, how we as spiritual houses of wellness, I'm going to extend that a bit, have to make room for, we can't just have people walk in and walk out. We are addressing their spirit and their soul, but their mind is not addressed. And so to give voice that it is okay, to give voice that there needs to be on the 5 and 10 year capital plan of the church's ministry, that there needs to be a spot, there needs to be a line item, if you will, for programmatic thrust. There needs to be money set aside. There needs to be an office. There needs to be somebody brought onto staff, or someone in the staff, in the church body, qualified, called and qualified, say amen, to address those issues.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yes. And then politics. We've got to, so there's a Violence Against Women Act before Congress now. It's in committee. It hasn't been voted on. And just like the Voting Rights Act, it needs to be renewed every so often. This should be something that is in perpetuity. Why do we need to renew something about violence against women? Why do we need to renew our right to vote? It's these marginalized communities, people of color, women, that have to have their stuff renewed every so often. We don't ever have to talk about white men's rights to do anything. I'm done for real, Pastor P.
I just had to skip on that one.
So, well, one of the things that I do want to kind of discuss is at True Light in Grand Rapids. One of the things that we've always done is we've tried to be forward on those concepts, those ideas, those conversations. So for the past couple of years, we've done, my sermons are based on series for the most part. So we've done series on mental health awareness, and we've talked about suicide and depression, anxiety, all those kinds of things. So we've been working in that fashion. We've also made it our due diligence to talk about helping those who are least lost and left out, speaking up for those who need to be spoken up for. So we've always tried to go in that direction. And I'm thankful for a church that has allowed me to stretch them in preaching. True Light, just a little historical reference, is the second oldest Baptist church in Grand Rapids. We're getting ready to celebrate 100 years next year. And we have an older congregation. Our congregation average age at this point is like 72.3. But they still let me preach this young people stuff. And I am just so thankful and appreciative to them for that. But also I want to just kind of share this thought and just kind of want to throw a little challenge out there to those of us who are watching on today. Because I think a lot of times when we have conversations about people not stepping up to the plate or doing what they need to do, we're quick to say the church. And the only reason why I'm saying this is because I'm currently in doctoral studies at United Theological Seminary, and Dr. Philip Pointer challenged me with this. He said, we always talk about the church, and church universal. But really what we're trying to say is it's the Western church that is messing up. It is the church right here in these yet to be United States, because churches all over the world are growing, they are thriving, and they are using a lot of these methods that we're talking about, things that we're trying to do. So we've made mistakes. They've seen the mistakes we've made, and they've been able to kind of pivot and kind of do some things that they need to do in these other countries. One of the issues that we run into right here in the United States is we don't all agree about who Jesus is, what Jesus is supposed to do, how active Jesus is supposed to be, how great the Holy Spirit is. So because we are still out dealing with those things, we can't deal with the larger issues of trying to help the whole person. And my prayer is that, especially with education being so accessible to our new ministers, they're able to go and get these degrees and those kinds of things, that they're able through education. And we hope that people take those opportunities to go to these places of higher education to learn, to grow. I'm thankful for the education I received at Payne Theological Seminary. It was all of those places that allowed me to get a different view. We still trying to decide if women should preach or not. We still struggling with that. So how are we going to deal with these bigger issues? And the answer is just keep swinging at it. And that's kind of what we do at True Light. Just keep swinging at the tree, and hopefully it'll fall down one day. That's all we can do.
Can I just tell a quick story on that, deciding if women can preach?
Wait, I gotta get the cup. Wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
At IC3 in Houston, Texas, I was walking down the hall with Dr. Gina Stewart.
Wait, what's IC3?
Dr. Ralph
the Sons of Issachar, it was originally called, but they changed it to IC3 to make it more inclusive. It's a conference that Dr. Ralph West and the Church Without Wall offers. But we're walking down the hall, and these very young preachers, the guy looked like he could have been in his 20s, 30s at the oldest, and he yells out to Dr. Stewart, "Hey, I want you to know you're one of my favorite female preachers." So I turned around to him and said, "She's one of your favorite preachers." And she said, "I got to bring you with me." But
you set him straight.
Category, like I got my favorite preachers, and then I got my favorite female. And what does the word say? There's neither male nor female. So a preacher is a preacher, but we categorize people as a female preacher. You're pretty good. Now, we know we're not supposed to compare the talent of preachers, but we do know Dr. Stewart is among the most gifted. So why even throw that little favorite female preacher in there?
Because we still working. We still working.
Praise God.
You male preacher bashing at this point.
No. It was just that one. Thank God we got some good brothers. She wouldn't have been on program if there weren't for others. Yeah. But what I find interesting when you were talking about the church, I think we have to nuance that just a little bit more and talk about churches. Because some churches, thank God, are well along the way of embracing women, and others have a long way to go. And I think we make a mistake when we do talk about the church. We often talk about what the church isn't doing. But thank God, this is basically a church organized conversation we're having right now. Mm-hmm. So there are some enlightened Christians, glory be to the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Hallelujah.
But we got a lot of work to do.
We do.
Even in that male language for God, because, I could have said to the Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer. We have to be careful, because I shocked some of my students the other week when I told them God wasn't a man. One of them is still reeling with it.
Mm-hmm. That is a struggle. The seminary struggle. I'm with you.
So we're going to have a little follow-up on this one. This is going to be a book. I'm just saying to all who's watching, this is going to be a book.
Let's do it.
Okay. So let me read from the comments. So thank you, those people who are recording in the chat. You are my stream team. This is my stream team. The stream team of the people who take notes. I always say whenever you are speaking, whether it is live or on these digital platforms, ask people to take notes for you, because things will fly out of your spirit. You don't even know that they're saying them, and somebody can just resonate with their spirit. Have them type it, have them enter into the chat. So let me read one. So someone responded with the Say Her Name, which is to raise awareness for Black female victims of police brutality and anti-Black violence. Thank you very much. Thank you for those people, because Pastor Pace, when you said the least, the lost, and the left out, I'm going to run with that one. I'm just telling you the bar. LD Glover. I think I know.
I hear Rosie Graham in my head. I hear that's a Rosie Graham thing. That's trying to help those who are marginalized. She was real big on that. That's a Rosie Graham heart thing. Yeah.
Okay, somebody type that in the chat because I can't type and talk at the same time. So someone else said the thinking is that these laws need to be renewed because we delude ourselves into thinking that these conditions will disappear over time. That's right. Don't just put it on the books and then say, okay, we gave them their little carrot. Now let's let the dust settle and move on to something else. No, we're going to keep at you every couple of years because y'all going to forget intentionally.
The Build Back Better. Yeah, y'all better look at that. That's a thing.
Help somebody. Help somebody.
Ooh, I need another cup. I need another cup. All right. The last comment from LT Clever Q is the Western Church is divided. Yes, the Western Church is divided. We confuse charity, which often results from our largesse, with social justice and equity. Thank you very much.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Okay, we need a part 2. We're going to end in 9 minutes, but we're going to have a part 2. I'm just saying. Y'all up for December? All right, we'll schedule something. But so actually, I want to just extend a thought, Pastor Pace, that you just put into the conversation, and it literally will be a whole other library of a conversation. You said the Western Church of these yet to be United States. I know I'm going to step on a couple of corns right now. When you mentioned that some other churches, or let's say in some other countries, in essence, are maybe like, let's say, a step ahead of us in terms of agreeing on whatever the I want to say like the archetype of who God is, what Jesus did, who he represent. What gender, if we're going to genderize, okay, I know, don't kick me out, my church, don't kick me out, Salem, what gender the creator is. There are other thoughts, and now I'm moving from Western to, let's say, Eastern. There are other thoughts and philosophies that don't put the creator into this male female, or if they do, they sort of like resolve themselves of, listen, you know what the issue is? It's peace that we're trying to share. It's love that we're trying to share. It's the embracing of the one, however you identify the one. Now, I'm not trying to cross, religious tides here, but I am just trying to get people to think, because here's what's happening. And I know some people are seeing it, but maybe I would love for the church to identify with one word: mindfulness. It's the new catchphrase. Now, 15, 20 years ago, and my mama is watching, so my mama is going to probably start blowing up the chat. If there's anything outside of the Bible, it is not going to walk into this household. And my mother will quickly say, when they took prayer out of the schools, come on, Mama, I know you're going to type. When they took prayer out of the schools, that's when all of this stuff started to hit the fan. Well, I now am part of an institution that is taking a mindful minute every day. And we're incorporating that into the minds of children. On another conversation, I would love for churches or church leaders or church hierarchy, denominations within the let's just say the Baptist and the Protestant sectors, to address how they're responding, absorbing, aligning themselves, being an advocate, if not something else, to this whole mindfulness idea. Because if you're going to say we're going to pause so we can center ourselves, center yourself on who? On what? For who? For what? We're going to breathe. Now, I'm okay with it, with some of it, but when it says we literally have curriculum, we send people away for 4 or 5 days to learn this, so that we don't teach a religion, but you are teaching a theology of something. We don't have to answer it now, but it's just something that I'm like, everybody's into mindfulness. Everybody's into like the deep breathing. If the church is going to accept therapy and seeing counselors and meditation, how are these things going to better us as people? How is it going to help us be mindful of our neighbor? When we see violent acts in front of us, are we going to be, as Dr. Patterson said, voyeurs? Are we going to say, well, I am doing something, I'm recording it, so that at least somebody else has a record of what's going on? Or am I going to be mindful enough and appreciative enough and loving enough of my neighbor to step in somehow in some way? And at the onset of this conversation, I said, people just want to get home. They just want to get to their family. They were not signing up for, I woke up today to go get a bat or get a 2x4 and crack it over somebody's head.
But can I challenge you just real quick?
Oh, please. That's what
so we're gonna say the church. The church has always been that kind of culprit of voyeurism. Just real quick, I'm gonna give you one verse and get you out of here. Story of the Good Samaritan talks about the first person who comes by is a religious leader. He crosses the street, go the other way. Second person is a church person, cross the street. So we already guilty of, I just want to get home. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay. So,
and when we talk about churches that are growing, it's really the southern Latin America and the continent of Africa. The East-West is definitely the mindfulness, and you're 100% right about that. But Europe, the church been dead because of the Enlightenment. They were too smart. They figured out what wasn't real and all of that kind of stuff. What I think we can learn from the booming, blossom, growing churches that are Pentecostal is getting back to the spirit. Pastor Pace, you said earlier we can't agree on who Jesus. I would argue that the reason we're a yet to be United States is because there's too many gods. These patriotic, right-wing, radical evangelicals are not serving the same God that challenges us to love our neighbor. Putting on a mask is loving your neighbor, but you want to be free and infect everybody. So we have so much work to do in the capital C church, but I thank God for the Black church and Lott, Carey, and this opportunity to talk about women being as important as everybody else.
What else we gonna say? What else we gonna say?
Okay. Plug your stuff, Dr. Patterson. Shameless plug for the last 2 minutes, always.
But go ahead. We can wrap it up. I don't look.
Tell us how we can find you.
I may as well lean back.
Oh Lord. Free Your Mind is on WJIL Internet Radio. It's WJIL.today. And my guest tonight is Carla Jones Brown, who is a Presbyterian pastor of Arch Street Church in Philadelphia. And we're talking about sisterhood and service in a state of emergency.
Yeah, that's gonna be good. See, I know what I'm doing.
What's the thing? I'm gonna type
WJIL.today. Thursdays at 8 p.m.
Oh man, you get ready to go in there now. All right. Well, just real quick, shameless plug.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Lott, Carey. Y'all were amazing. I love y'all so much. Y'all stay tuned in January. I'm starting a new podcast called The Everyday Pastor. And it's just about a pastor and all this stuff about being a parent, a pet owner, husband, father, all that stuff. We're going to do that starting in January. So be on the lookout. It'll be on everywhere you get a podcast. So The Everyday Pastor.
The Everyday Pastor.
What to tune into that?
Wait a minute. I'm typing that in. The Everyday Pastor podcast.
And I am so grateful for this time on the digital couch. Thank you, Lott.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for those of you who know what I do outside of first Thursdays in the month, I have my own show. And it's already been said, it is called the Digital Couch. And I have entrepreneurs and inspirational leaders who inform, interact, and inspire their communities to live their life better. God bless you all. And if it were not for the women and Pastor Pace, who's sitting here with us.
And the women. I'll yield to that, the women. My mama was a woman.
That's why you are who you are, right? So can I say that in this really tough conversation, I'm really, really glad that we were able to laugh. To give some holy laughs, to give some, heartfelt joking moments to bring light to the situation. So yes, it's still a very tough situation. It's still a tough pill to swallow. It's should not occur. It's sad that it is occurring, but I'm glad that the church, the big church, and the little churches under the big church are making the steps within their own local communities to not just bring awareness and to sort of show up in black, like on Fifth Sunday, that we show up in white because it's Missionary Sunday, uh, but that we're not only showing up in the color, but we're showing up in our color. Ooh, somebody needs to write that down because we're speaking out. We're standing in the gap, right? Right. We're standing in the gap. We are being the advocates. We are being the allies, as Reverend Boissier said a few months ago. We are being the advocates and the allies and the activists in order to speak up for those who are not able to speak up. And if you do see someone, if you do see something, say something. Not just take out your phone and record it thinking you're going like, well, I'm going to submit this to the authorities so they see what happened. As the Spirit says, do what the Spirit says. You need to get home safely, but because it could happen to someone that you know. It probably has already happened to someone that you know, but because of the shame culture, they haven't felt comfortable within the church walls or the relationship that they are supposed to have with someone to actually say something.
Yes.
To help them say something. On behalf of the Lott Carey, Women in Service Everywhere, this has been episode 9 of The Digital Couch. Thank you to Pastor Pace. Thank you to Dr. Patterson for joining us tonight. We look forward to seeing you all on the next first Thursday of the month. We will have episode 10. Who knows? Might be them again because we got a lot to talk about. God bless you all and share this with someone because it is on my personal page on Lott Carey TV and on Lott Carey Wise. Good night.
Good night.